Hi everyone, welcome to Woolen Spinning. We've got a couple more minutes. I'm going to wait just a little bit longer before we jump into the show because we have a couple of giveaways to do, and we're already at episode 108, which is, it just boggles my mind. And like I said, this is the last show for 2018, and I will take a small break. For those who are already watching and already here, this next few weeks, I take a break. I do this in August and then I do it again in December. It's a natural break for me, usually those two times in the year, because in August we're usually away. And although this year, 2019, I might be changing it to July. Just we're trying to figure out some logistic stuff with a trip that we're planning. So I might take my unplug break in July, but we'll see. I'll keep you posted. But normally in August and December every year, I take sort of a 3 to 4 week unplug. It just gives me a chance to rest, re-energize, plan for the new year. I usually have quite a few things that come out in the latter part of December and in early January, just to let people know sort of what's going on and things to expect for the new year. And that just gives me a chance to focus on that and get that all going, so that I'm not trying to jump back and forth between podcasting and getting a show out and editing, and also trying to launch this stuff for the new year. So as you guys know, for 2019, we've got the 51 yarns spin along starting January 1st. I know some people have started spinning already, which is awesome. And I have started spinning mine because of course there's going to be content coming out January 1st. So because of that, the next couple of weeks, there's going to be some more information coming about that. Woolen Spinning has a newsletter now, which is really awesome. So if you go to wellforpearls.com, which is not Patreon, wellforpearls.com is my blog. If you go to my blog, at the very top, there's a bar that just says Woolen Spinning newsletter, and you can sign up. Just throw in your email address. You have to confirm that you want to subscribe, and it just gives you, you don't have to be a patron. This is for everybody. It just gives you updates of what's coming up and what's going on in the Woolen Spinning community, because sometimes I find it really difficult to disseminate information all at once in blog posts or in Patreon posts. I find they get missed and things aren't really clear because things are being posted separately. So this way I can post everything in one place. You guys get an overview of what's going on and what's coming up, links to whatever's going on and coming up, and you can pick and choose what you want to participate in and what you're interested in. The other thing that's starting in January that is new is the co-executive producer tier on Patreon. You guys will begin receiving the How I Spin vlog, which is a new thing and is starting January 1st for anybody who subscribes to the enhanced content, which is the How I Spin content. And if you subscribe to anything from the co-executive producer and above, you'll get the monthly vlog as well, which is kind of neat. So vlogs are usually sort of between 10 and 20 minutes long, and they are more of a journal. They have information in them. They're usually about a specific topic, and it's an opportunity for me to go into a little bit more detail about the yarns that I spin. And then if you want the finite detail, the sampling, what yarns look like when I spin them up and when I knit them and weave them, the How I Spin content which is part of the enhanced content, gives you all of that. So if you're wondering about more, you can go to patreon.com. You can have a look at all that. But the newsletter is sort of a catch-all for all this stuff, and you can kind of see the breakdown of what everything looks like. I have quite a few giveaways. Welcome to everybody who is a patron of the show and is watching the live stream. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's our last show of 2018. So to those who celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. To those who celebrate Hanukkah, I hope you had a good Hanukkah. And to those who celebrate anything else, happy holidays, and I hope you get a bit of a break at this time of year. And Happy New Year, because the next episode will be coming out January. Let me just double check because I'm going to give you a wrong date otherwise. So for patrons, the next live stream will be January 9th, 2019. So thank you to everybody who is joining me today. Thank you for your ongoing support and your ongoing interest in the show and enthusiasm about what's happening here. I really appreciate it. For returning viewers, thank you so much for continuing to watch the show and for spending this time with me. And for new viewers, welcome to the show. I hope that you enjoy what you find here. You are welcome, and I hope that you come over to the Ravelry group. There are links beneath in the show notes. You can go to wellforpearls.com and all of the show notes will be there, and you'll have a direct link there to get to the Ravelry group if you are not already a member. We're getting dangerously close to 2,000 members in the Ravelry group, so please don't forget to go into the introductions thread and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're spinning from, what you spin on, spindles, wheels, whatever your tool of choice is, and I will do another draw from that thread once we hit 2,000 subscribers. So please don't forget to introduce yourself. I really appreciate it, even if I don't get back to everybody. I welcome you. It's hard to keep up with all the posts. And I do try to keep it relatively chatter-free so that if I do have a draw, we can draw relatively easily. So when we hit 2,000 members in the Ravelry group, I will do another draw. And I think what we'll do actually is a calendar giveaway, because people seem to really enjoy getting these, and I really enjoy making them. I like doing all the photos for them, and it's just a really inspiring thing to sit on your desk, especially for those who have office jobs and can put it on their desk. And it's just a daily reminder and inspiration of the thing that we love so much that brings us all together. All right. Yeah, we're at like 1,700 right now. It's crazy. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Shara. It's good to see everybody. Thank you again for spending some time with me today. So we've got giveaways. I have a little bit. I already did the housekeeping. We've got some spinning growth, which I am hoping I get some ideas from the chat that's going on over here I feel like it's like over here in the never land, because the spinning growth this time round was a really interesting one, and I am hoping that you guys have some thoughts about it as well. I have some yarn that I finished, which is right down here. I have some breed and color studies that I wanted to talk about very briefly, and I actually have a knitted object that I started. Before I get into all of that, I knit my son a toque. It's out of Barocco Vintage, nothing special, but I needed it to be machine washable, and I needed it to be able to like fall in the mud on the school ground and be able to just get it clean and wash it in the washing machine. So he picked the colors. He wanted orange and blue, and he wanted it in the toque that I knit up recently that was a test knit that I still can't talk about because she still hasn't released the pattern. And it's a brioche stitch, and it's a brioche pattern. I think I showed you guys the inside of it a couple months ago maybe. Anyways, I did him one. It came out absolutely massive. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if my gauge was just really off or if I was rushing it. I don't know. I used the same needle size as I did for mine. The yarn was the same gauge. I have no idea. So anyways, I've given it to my dad because his head is massive. My dad's head around is 25 inches. So it was actually perfect on him, and he was really happy to receive it. But now I have to start all over again. And it's just, at this time of year, it's like the last thing you want to do. So I'm going to be working on that this weekend. I've got quite a lot of shifts coming up at work, and I have packed it. I'm taking it with me. I don't actually think I have my project. Yeah, I don't have the project bag close by, so I can't even pull it out and show you guys. But what a bummer, hey? At this time of year, you just want to get something like that finished, and then you can move on to other things. So as a break from the toque that went wrong for James, I started something else, and I will show that to you today. All right, let's do giveaways because those are the most fun thing to do. So for those who have followed the podcast for a while, you'll know that we give away these calendars, and I will just put this into focus so that I can show you guys. Actually, it's pretty focused already. This is the one that starts in January of 2019. I used quite a few photos in it from projects from the last year, the last 18 months or so. I'm not going to show them all to you because then it's a little bit of it's a spoiler otherwise. You want to get it and see what's in it. We've got two winners. So one was the Patreon giveaway that we do every month. I haven't listed on the Patreon. I had to take it off. You're actually technically, according to Patreon, because I got an email from them, you're not allowed have the different reward tiers be for giveaways. So if you subscribe to like $1 a month, you can't subscribe based on the creator doing giveaways. And so after a discussion back and forth with Patreon, they said, they try to catch as many campaigns as they can. They can't obviously catch all of them, but you're really not supposed to be pledging for a giveaway. So I took all the giveaway down because I needed to respect their policies, and I actually kind of agree. So I just wanted to be really clear that I wasn't breaking any rules as I modified it for them. So the calendar giveaway is not listed on Patreon. That doesn't mean we can't not still do a giveaway. So this is for our Patreon subscribers. I put everybody into the random number, and then I go through and I count manually who won. So this month is Rosemary, and I've already sent her an email and she's already gotten back to me, and this will go in the mail for you, Rosemary, this week. Canada Post is getting back to normal. They're saying really long delivery times and that things aren't necessary. Don't expect your stuff to get out and don't expect your stuff to get to international shipping addresses. My stuff has gone out really, really quickly. We received some stuff from Ontario last night that was shipped out on Friday, sorry. And we got it last night. Last night was Tuesday. So I think they are getting through things really quickly. They're just trying not to make everybody have really high expectations and then be really disappointed. So they're keeping expectations low, but to me, shipping is happening quite quickly. So this is going to go out to Rosemary. And then we had the November giveaway, and I was going to give away fibre. I was going to card up some stuff for you guys. I just haven't had a chance. It's been a little bit too crazy around here. And hi, Valerie. And I decided to do a calendar because I had one left over for 2019. And this one is going to post number 11, who said that she learned last month that it is important to sample before a large project. And this is going to post number 11, Singer02. And you don't have your name listed on your Ravelry profile, so I don't know your first name, but I know you're super active in our Ravelry group. So Singer02, if you could send me your mailing address and your full name, that would be awesome. And I will pop those in the mail this week. Merry Christmas to both of you, and congratulations. It's a pleasure to be able to give this stuff away. So we will have more calendars next month. So if you guys want calendars to be given away more often, like if you're for the Ravelry giveaways, like for the episode threads, just let me know. Like just pop it in when you enter this month for the December giveaway that I'll announce in January. If you would like to see more calendars given away, just let me know, because I can do that. If you would rather get a calendar than get fibre, I can always give you a choice too. So let me know if that is something that you would prefer in the giveaways, or if you'd like a little bit of both. I find sometimes we end up with a lot of fibre in our stash, and these are just really inspirational and they're kind of nice to have on our desks. Mine from 2018 is just sitting right here. And it's kind of fun to flip back and remember some of the projects that we've worked on in the past. And then after I'm done with them, I give them to my mom and she works them into her collage. She does 3-dimensional paper collage, and so I often give them to her and she cuts them all up and works them in. It's kind of neat. I think that's it for housekeeping, because I mentioned about the small break that's coming up. I will return the second week of January with regular podcasting, and we'll go back to 2 episodes a month starting in January. This is just a time for me to unplug, get some rest, spend time with family. I do tend to take a 2-week social media break. So if you message me on Instagram, I probably won't respond. And I don't tend to post a lot at this time of year. I just find I really need a chance to decompress and disconnect. And I really only check the Slack channel during this time and the Ravelry group. So as of about the end of next week, so about 10 days from now, I sort of take a 2-week from social media. And a lot of it's just because we are so ingrained in it all the time, and I find I really need the break. And I really enjoy that chance to just back off from it for a little while. There will be a vlog, kind of a vlog information video released. It's going to be public. It's not a private link or anything, for everybody, with a little bit more information on the 51 yarn spin along that will be starting in January. So watch out for that. That will be coming up. and the newsletter will have some information that goes out on the 14th. So if you want more newsletter information, go to wellforpearls.com, and it's at the top, along the top bar. Plug in your email address, and then you'll get a once a month newsletter. I'm not going to be sending it out any more than that. It'll just come out once a month with general housekeeping for the next month. And that's for everybody. You don't have to be a patron for that. And I think that's it for housekeeping. That's pretty good. Spinning growth. I'm going to switch the cameras around. Bear with me. This month's is from Frog Stitch, which is Sharon. She had a really interesting one this month, and I'm very curious to hear what you guys in the chat channel have to say about it, because yeah, it's an interesting one. In some ways, it's very similar to what just happened to me in my sparkle cardigan. So I'd really like to hear your ideas and your feedback around it and what you guys think. So let me read what she wrote. This was back in June, and we'll kind of go from there after I read. So let's hear what Sharon had to say. Do gauge swatches from hand spun yarn lie even more than gauge swatches from commercial yarn do? I spun a 3-ply sport weight Romney alpaca blend for a custom order. Love the yarn. Took her measurements and did the swatches. The sleeves up to the underarm bind off are perfect. Then I started the back. It was to be an A line. I was decreasing one stitch every side, each side every 8th row. Sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful. I was decreasing one stitch each side every 8th row, which should have brought it in. Found the trouble, or so I thought. It was an all-over cable pattern, and when I had run out of stitches to make a whole cable, I just knit those stitches. Well, without the cable to cinch in the fabric, it was actually growing wider, even though I was decreasing away. Lesson learned. I took out 2 cable repeats and decided that the A-line shaping would have to be accomplished in the blocking. Ripped back and spent 8 more hours knitting and held it up to my client. Still too big. I have narrowed it once again and believe I finally have the right number of repeats. I suspect that I finally, quote unquote, relaxed into the project and the stitch pattern. Now I am worried that the top part of the sleeves will not match the bottom part. I will have to be very conscientious. And then these are the photos. So on her project page on Ravelry, I found all of these photos. The photo that she posted in the spinning growth thread on Ravelry was a little bit blurry, and it was a little bit hard to see once I enlarged it for the podcast. So I took these photos out of her project page. So Sharon, thank you so much for posting all those photos, because it really made a big difference to being able to really see the sweater and be able to understand sort of what the overall cable pattern really looked like. So I'm not sure the gauge swatches from hand spun yarn lie even more than commercial yarn does. I don't know how big your swatches were, or what you were knitting on, or what your needle size was, or anything. Not that needle size matters, but you know what I mean. I don't know like how big your swatches were. Did you do a cable swatch and a stockinette swatch? Did you do a combination of both in the same swatch? How much ease did you want? Did you want a really tight sweater for her? Did you want it a little bit looser? It looks like it fits her beautifully. Before I go on, in the January episode of Wool and Spinning Radio, Katrina and I go down a little bit of a rabbit hole about how long creating takes and how many hours we spend creating. So Sharon knows that this took her 8 hours, and we actually mentioned Sharon in Wool and Spinning Radio in the episode that's coming up in January. We just recorded it the other day, because she trades her crafting and making time, so knitting and spinning, with her massage therapist. So her massage therapist, they pay each other via time, which I think is really cool. So in the Ravelry group, several times she's mentioned how long something has taken, and she has it down to the hour. So this sweater, spinning and knitting, took her 144 hours, and that is from her project page in Ravelry. So pretty impressive, and also a good reminder of how long this stuff takes, because that's 6 days. Is that 6 days? I think it's 6 days worth of spinning and knitting, day and night, 24/7 for 6 days. And she got this. Amazing. One of the things that came to mind with this with me was, I don't know if she knit the sleeves in the round or not, but that was a major issue with my sparkle cardigan. My gauge changed significantly when I went from knitting in the round to knitting flat. And I never really realized how much my gauge changes when I go from knitting in the round to knitting flat, and regardless of whether it's hand spun or commercial yarn, until I started really paying attention and doing gauge swatches of both. So doing a gauge swatch in the round and doing a gauge swatch flat. Also, the longer I knit on stuff and the more fabric I create, the more relaxed I get. So the more relaxed I get, the looser my gauge becomes. So when I first start knitting on something, my gauge is generally a little bit tighter. My cast on is a little bit tighter. The first few rows are a little bit tighter. And then as I get into it and I get into the rhythm, particularly if I'm sitting for a longer period of time and working on something for a longer chunk of time, my knitting gets looser and looser and looser and looser. Now, I will say that my gauge in the round tends to be more consistent than my gauge knit flat, because my purl row is always, no matter what I do, if I was really concerned about it, I would have to change needle sizes. My purl row is always tighter than my knit row. So when I knit in the round and I'm knitting every round, my gauge tends to grow. And then when I knit flat, because I have that tighter purl row, my gauge tends to be smaller. And you would think that that would cause like a flaring of the fabric, that I would have a looser row, a tighter row, a looser row, but it doesn't look that way from the outside. It probably means that if I'm knitting on the right side on 3.75 millimeter needles, I should probably be purling back on 3.5 millimeter needles. No, sorry, on 4 millimeter needles, and constantly be switching needles. And my friend Deborah, that's exactly what she does when she's doing sample knits and whatnot, where her gauge has to be exactly perfect for sample knits. But I just have not ever gone there, and I've not ever kind of delved into that. But that is definitely something. If you're getting major discrepancies in your knit row versus your purl row, it might be something to think about. I'm just going to look at what chat is saying, because they have lots to say today. I just love them. They are always so chatty. I guess that's why they're called chat. So Kelly says, isn't that funny? My gauge gets tighter the longer I go. That's really interesting. I wonder if do you think it's like a tension thing? Like as you knit longer, you get more, not anxious, but like tense because you're sitting there and you want to get it done? I would really like to know what that is behind, like what's going on there. Yes, we all lose track of time when we're knitting. That is why Sharon times herself. She literally times herself with a timer. It's amazing. But that's how you would, if you're going to trade time with somebody or charge for your time, you would have to, because Katrina and I, this is the rabbit hole that Katrina and I fell down in the January episode, which you guys will hear in just a couple weeks. You maybe work on something for a year, but what does that really mean? How many hours was that really? Projects go on timeout, projects get put aside, you pull them out, you work on them for a bit, you put them back away, you rip things out, you re-knit. You completely lose track of how long something actually took. So that's why Sharon times herself. Interchangeable needles with one size at one end and a different size at the other. That's what I was thinking I should probably do if I really cared enough. I know that's what my friend Deborah does. She uses, I think she uses Chow Goose, and because she likes the really pointy tips, and she has one size at one end and one size at the other. And because they're stamped right on the needle with the size, she knows exactly which needle is which so that she doesn't get mixed up. So that's something to think about for sure. That has happened to me several times on sweaters. I swatched properly but relaxed. On piece sweaters, I block the back before the armholes and adjust the width of the fronts and armhole location. That's really interesting, Rebecca. So this is from Rebecca, who's Rebby J on the Slack channel and on Ravelry. So on piece sweaters, she blocks the back before she does the armholes, and then she adjusts the width of the front and the armhole location to adjust for any relaxed gauge as she knits. That's really interesting. How dense was the yarn? Alpaca always ends up heavy and growing. Alpaca Romney is probably a pretty dense yarn, which makes a difference when the finished garment is so much larger than the swatch. So Rebecca, that's Becca's comment. I also thought alpaca grows, and it will grow and grow and grow and grow, which is why we often blend it with wool. And I was wondering if that was part of what was going on, because as it gets heavier, and Sharon does say in her project page, because I read that as well, that her grist between all of her yarns did vary a little bit, and she had wondered in further discussion down further in the thread whether that had affected it at all, so that as she knit through her balls of yarn, her gauge was changing, so the knitting weight was changing, and that would change your gauge. I'm not sure it would change it that much. I suspect her knitting was changing as well, if not just her knitting, just because of my experiences and like my experience with the sparkle cardigan, for example. But that is a really interesting thing, and you do have to expect that alpaca is going to grow. On the very rare occasion that I work with alpaca, and the only reason why I don't work with alpaca more is because I'm allergic to it. I get really, really congested immediately. As soon as I start spinning with it or knitting with it or anything, I just get like really, really, really congested. And I start sneezing and coughing, and it's just not very pleasant. And I'm fine with llama. It's just alpaca. But I do tend to do really big swatches for alpaca so that I can see how much it's going to grow when I wash it and block it. I have heard that the weight of the fabric plays a part in your tension as you move down the garment. Absolutely, Megan. Usually I find I'm not paying attention as much because I'm used to what I'm doing and I get tighter. I don't know, it's a bit of a mystery. That's interesting. So we were talking about the getting tighter as you knit and as you sit. Yeah, that would be really frustrating in color work. So as you sit and knit on something, and the longer you knit on it and the tighter you're getting in color work, that would be really frustrating. I hear you there, Kelly. I've noticed hand spun is often kind of bouncier, like I have to use a larger needle with the same wraps per inch in commercial yarn. Maybe it makes the lying swatch. Maybe that makes the lying swatch due to the relaxation a bigger factor. Yeah, that's interesting. So what Rebecca's saying is that because hand spun sometimes is a little bit bouncier, and I think part of that's because we can make the yarns that we want. So you can make a really bouncy 3-ply, like this was a 3-ply sport weight. Well, if the singles were, just for an example, a little bit lower twist, and then you give it a really nice high twist ply, it's going to be like a really bouncy yarn. It's going to have it's going to have a bit of poof, which is, for Romney, like that would be a really, really nice yarn, because Romney is it's a great yarn. It's a great yarn for sweaters. It's got a nice hand to it, and that would, accentuate the characteristics of the underlying fiber. You'd get even more bounce and sproing and stuff like Polworth and Targhee and some of those other finer wools. But here, handspun does tend to have a life to it that commercial yarns don't often have. Not all of them, but often. So if you have that relaxation in the swatch where you have that sort of the relaxation that you would get in commercial yarn versus a hand spun, you're going to have a different gauge, your gauge is going to act differently. So that's kind of interesting, that idea of sort of a lying swatch, like that it lies to you. That would make me think that we would have greater success with larger swatches when we're swatching with hand spun. Does anybody have any experience with that? Like that they need to knit larger swatches when they're working with their hand spun? I tend to knit quite big swatches anyways, so that's sort of a non-issue for me, but I would like to hear from others if that's been an issue. I also read, this is from Megan, I also just read an interesting article on combating cable flare in Interweave Knits winter of 2018, talking about different gauges with different pattern motifs. Oh yeah, that's interesting. So that's in the most recent issue of Interweave Knits, winter of 2018, cable flare. I think we often make our swatches too small. Absolutely, Katrina, and welcome. Hello. I definitely never knit my swatches big enough. It's a character flaw. I don't think your integrity as a person is necessarily determined by the size of your swatches. I love it. I have always assumed that the sproing and bounce that a hand spun has, that commercial doesn't, is because of the super high tension that mills put on fiber in the machines. Yes, it's also because the commercial yarns don't tend to have as much twist in them. They tend to only be twisted enough. What's his name? Alden Amos. He talks about this, that mills, when they're producing commercial yarn, they only put enough twist in to hold the yarn together. So you're not going to have really active over twisted yarns. That's part of the reason why some of these newer yarns that are hitting the market that are higher twist and are marketed as higher twist, why people like them so much is because they have more life to them. They wear better. They make great socks. A lot of mills, like if you take apart some of the commercial yarns, like if you really take them apart and figure out how many twists per inch are in them as you untwist them and then they drift apart, there's not a lot of twist in them. They're only twisted enough. Not all commercial yarns, but a lot of them are only twisted enough to hold them together. It doesn't make for bouncy, springy, lifelike yarns. It's one of the reasons why once you start knitting with your hand spun and you can manipulate some of those factors, why people are like, oh my goodness, there's so much life in this, especially if you are controlling the process almost or right from the beginning. I tend to shy, so this is really interesting. Shara says, I tend to shy away from large swatches because I don't want to waste my precious handspun yarn. So Brenda Dane, who used to host Cast On, which was an amazing audio podcast, and it was probably like, she was probably the mother of sort of knitting podcasts, if you will. She was one of the first people to really turn on the mic and really get into talking about her knitting. She talked about ripping out her swatches to use them in the project. So her whole thing was don't swatch appropriately just because you might run out of yarn. Swatch appropriately, rip it out, wash the yarn so that it's ready to go when you get to the end of your project and you need that extra, 20, 30, 40, 50 grams, 50 yards of yarn. Yeah, Katrina was one of the first people that I met in person, because Katrina just said I also frog my swatches after. She's one of the first people that I met that did that actually did that in practice. Didn't just talk about it, but actually did it. So swatch appropriately. We talked about this last show too, about swatching appropriately. Don't skimp on swatching just because you don't want to waste your yarn. Pull that swatch out, skein that swatch up on one of those. I don't have mine within hand, but ask for one for Christmas. A sampling nitty naughty, swatch, wind off your swatch yarn onto your sampling nitty naughty, wash it, finish it like you did the original yarn, and then once you get to the point in your project where you need that yarn, it's ready to go. All right. Okay, we're going to move on. This is a great comment to end on. Suzanne says, how bad is it that I don't swatch from sheer laziness? I guess that means you can't complain, right? If things don't work out, you can't complain. I thought your sampling nitty naughty was your elbow. No, you know what? I used to use my, like I used to go around here and do that. I bought a sampling Nitty Naughty a while ago and I wish I had it here. It's a 1 yard around. I got the Ashford one. I think it was like $20 or $25 or something. It was totally worth it. I use it so much. Especially when you've got some enders left and you want that little, like if I spin a traditional 3-ply sock yarn, for example, and I have a little bit left on my bobbin, I'll chain ply it up, but I know I only have like, 10 or 20 yards. I'll put it on my sampling Nitty Naughty. It gives me that little baby skein. I use it all the time. And if you ever go to workshops, especially big workshops where you're going to be spending tons of samples, you need to get a sampling Nitty Naughty. It's just, you just need it. Yeah, I don't like to, you can use half of your Nitty Naughty. See, this is the thing, like if you're going to workshops and stuff, or you're going to retreats and whatnot, and you're traveling a little bit, if you can take stuff that's smaller, that's my only reason, is being able to take stuff in one. I take a clear tote, it's about yay big, and if I can't fit it in there, it doesn't come with me, so I take my bobbins apart, my Nitty Naughty I take apart, but I try to only take one tote of sort of accessories, if you will. And that's actually why I bought my sampling Nitty Naughty. Yeah, a Swift is not portable. But if you're not traveling a ton, then making do with what you have is definitely the way to go. I just find that I use my sampling one a lot. So it's a great gift. Like if somebody's wondering about what to get you, ask for that. All right, let's move on because I have yarn to show you. I have breed and color studies to talk about, and I have my new cast on to talk about. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. And I would like to talk about my, what do you guys want to talk about first? My finished yarn or breed and color studies? I'm going to switch my cameras around while you guys decide. I'm not going to go into too much detail about breed and color studies for two reasons. First of all, some people haven't received their fibre yet because it's still in transit. And secondly, I've only just started playing around with it, and I feel like this would be a really great topic of conversation more in like January and February. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what I did first. So I took my 3 braids and I broke it all apart. So this is the black here, and I haven't even touched it yet. So that one we're not even going to talk about today. But my traditional hand paint, the one that was the, hi Karma, was the control, if you will. I divided it up into 3, and I decided, I started to, banging myself on everything and bashing around the cameras, getting all flustered because of breed and color study. I'm so excited. I decided to do a sample skein because I wasn't totally sure how I wanted to spin all of this, and it's a lot of fiber to commit to spinning, and I have an idea percolating in the back of my mind, and I'm not quite at the point where I'm wanting to share it, but I have sort of this idea. It came from a conversation at the Sweet Georgia Christmas party. When was that? Last Wednesday, like a week ago. Today's Wednesday. Oh my gosh. And I sort of had this idea, and it's sort of been percolating ever since, and I had been thinking about it before that, but it really started to take shape as we were having some chats at dinner. So I decided to treat a third of the control colorway. So the control colorway was the one that Katrina didn't do anything with. So she just painted it like a traditional hand paint, something you would see on the wall at a fiber show. And I just decided to approach it the way that I would approach pretty much any braid of hand painted fiber, regardless of the breed, regardless of any other extenuating circumstances, like wanting to spin a different way or wanting to create a specific yarn for a project. I sort of just unbraided it, laid it out on our table, on our dining room table, and just had a really good look at the colors and how they matched up. And I had talked to Katrina, so I sort of knew where the colors were and how they were laid out in relation to one another. And then I started doing a control card. So this strand of, it looks like pink on my monitor. I wonder if it looks like pink on yours. It is the rusty color that's in the braid, this one here. And I just spun for a while and I did a ply back test and I didn't like it. And so I spun for a bit longer, added some more twist, did a ply back test, liked it a bit better, spun a bit more, added more twist, did another ply back test, really liked it. So I ended up with a yarn. The singles are 32 wraps per inch. See if I can find a ruler here. The singles are 32 wraps per inch, and the ply back test is 6.5 bumps per inch. So 3.25 twists per inch. So relatively high twist for a fiber that has a staple length that is as long as this is. Right? Because this was our was it last show that we did the combing to see how long the staple was in here? My friend Kim over at Clada Fiber Arts, she's the one that taught me how to do this. And she just put up a great blog post about combing your worsted prep and figuring out your staple length. So head over to Clada Fiber Arts, and Kim's blog post is excellent. So for a fiber that is as long stapled as this is, you don't need a ton of twist to hold it together. But to get a yarn that I liked in the ply back test, I did keep adding twist to sort of see what I could get away with. And this has made a really nice yarn. And as you can see, a couple of people have mentioned about the halo. The halo is just gorgeous. So this down here was one of the first ply back tests that I did because I wanted to be able to see the comparison. So this ply back test, you can see how relaxed the twist angle is. It's like they're almost laying like parallel. I would say this twist angle is, I don't know, like 10 degrees, maybe 15. I do need more coffee, Eve. We've had several really late nights. I haven't actually finished this skein yet, so Eleanor is wondering if I thwacked or snapped this skein. I haven't washed it yet, so I haven't done anything with it just yet. Yeah, this is 10 degrees. So I've got my trusty little, what are these called again? I can't even remember. Oh my gosh. I do need more coffee, Eve. My angle though, my twist angle is only 10 degrees, which on this one. So this was my first ply back test. And then after that, this is sort of more like .30 degrees. So after my third ply back test, this ended up being 30 degrees. So a little bit more twist. And then these are my singles. And the singles I'm spinning to 32 wraps per inch, so pretty fine. The yarn will end up being roughly 18 wraps per inch, roughly. So a light fingering. I think it's the halo that makes the yarn seem puffier than it is. Like if you look at that halo, I don't know why it's so dark. I upped my white balance, but it just doesn't seem to. But you can see, like, even without washing it yet or finishing it, it's got a lot of halo and it's quite fuzzy. So I'm going to spin up these two. This is going to go to one bobbin. This is going to go to the other bobbin. I'll ply them together. And then I will finish it. I'll finish these yarns all together. So this yarn will get finished. I'll finish them all together. So protractor. Thank you, you guys. I'm seeing here tractor. I knew it was something. So thank you. But the colors, amazingly, really matched up well. And I tried to keep the colors together when I was spinning, so I stripped this down a few times. And I did try to keep the colors together. And there is some barber pulling in there. But short of chain plying, which I'm not sure this fiber is going to really want to chain ply very well. It's quite wiry. It's not a fiber that's going to bend really super well. Like if you look, if I add some twist, just give me a sec. So, oh, actually, maybe I'll show you here. See how, a little bit more twist. See how wiry it is? It's really, and you see how it loops at the end, because the fiber doesn't want to bend really well. Like with the fine yarns, they tend to bend and they make really tight loops. This is going to make slightly bigger loops if you chain ply it. Doesn't mean you can't, but you're going to get slightly more pronounced loops than you would with a fine yarn. I also didn't want a 3-ply. I wanted 2-ply yarn, so I did decide to leave it as a 2-ply. So chain plying wasn't an option for this for me personally. And this fiber would have been really lovely left as singles too. And actually I meant to grab my Masham singles and I forgot, but it makes really gorgeous yarn as singles. Masham is a beautiful one left as singles. I'm just looking at chat. Chat's very chatty. I think I tried. Good thing. So they all yelled out protractor at the same time, and Becca's like, all together now. You guys are so funny. Will you spin all 3 braids the same? So that's my plan because of this idea that's percolating at the back of my mind. I'm not sure about my idea yet, but so let's talk about the white, because before I go down that little segue. So this was my control braid, and I just wanted to see if what I was thinking about was going to work. So slightly higher twist singles and then a lower twist, low twist angle ply. Because if you notice with this yarn, and I'll just pop it down for you guys to really see, it doesn't have a high twist angle. It's quite relaxed. It's a little bit more than 10 degrees. It's about 15 to 18 degrees, maybe 20 degrees, but it's very relaxed. But it's still strong. Like when you pull on it, it's still strong. And I was trying to break it with my hand just to see how strong it was, and I wasn't able to. So what I did with the white braid, because that's actually what I've started spinning now, is I took the white braid and I just started stripping it down, and I haven't attenuated it or pre-drafted it. I've just been spinning it end to end, and I started this the other day and I'm halfway through, and actually the bobbin is still on my wheel and I didn't take it off because I have one more of these little nests to spin for the first half of the spin. And I've been spinning these. This is the white, like I said. So this is the colorway that has the white in it. I've just been spinning randomly. So I stripped the braid down as much as I could without having it fall apart, because I've been finding with this fiber, the more you strip it, the more it becomes flyaway, the more it becomes a little bit less organized, because it's long stapled. It's quite... While on one hand it's a bit toothy, on the other hand it's got this halo, which you can sort of see. And it doesn't want to stay aligned as nicely as some of the long wools would. So, you know, Wensleydale, I find when you start to strip it, it at least stays really nicely aligned. This kind of wants to come apart. So I didn't strip it and strip it and strip it and ruin the integrity of the fiber that Katrina had dyed. And then I just started spinning randomly. So I was just picking these out, spinning them end to end. I wasn't worried about which end I was starting at. Some of them broke halfway through stripping the fiber down, and I've just been spinning them and throwing them in. Like, I haven't been paying any attention with where the fiber is in terms of making sure colors match up. So I'm fully expecting in the white braid I'm going to get a lot of barber pulling, but the yarn, the structure of the yarn will be the same as this one. So I expect more barber pulling, and I expect those colors, especially where they barber pull with the white and where I drafted, because it goes color, white. So it's a little bit different than the space dye that we did for the fin study last year, where I'm drafting out and I've got white and color over both staple lengths. And if you want to know more about how Katrina dyed this fiber and how she planned it, the woolen spinning radio episode for this month just was released to all patrons this morning. I was a little bit delayed in doing that, so sorry about that. It's a couple days late, but it's available now. Those colors where they blend become more pastel, and then in the finished skein where they ply with the white, it's going to be quite muted and quite quiet in those sections, and then you'll have the bursts of color where color plies with color. So I'm really excited to see that. So this is half finished, but structurally the yarn will be the same as this. It's just going to be interesting to see how it swatches up differently and how the knitted fabric looks, because it's going to look quite different. This is going to be quite saturated and quite colorful, and this one is going to be quite muted with these little hits of color. Maybe like confetti kind of, but with a little bit of striping, because the color repeats are quite long, so which I'll show you. So like that's quite long in there with a lot of color with only a little bit of white. So that's going to make for quite a bit of color, but if it plies with a section that's white, it's going to tone it down. So show that to you down here. So I'm kind of, I love spinning with white. If you've followed me for a while and if you read the Sweet Georgia blog when I was still blogging and spinning for them, you'll know how much I love spinning with white. And I really like how white plays into the colors and how it changes our colors and how it changes how we do our color management. So that's why I decided to spin this next before finishing off this one, because I just wanted to see. So that's where I'm at with that. I'm hoping to spin quite a bit over the next week or so on this. Like I said, I'm working a lot at the hospital over the next couple weeks, but it's gonna be I'm really excited to see all these yarns come together, and also how different they're all gonna be, because they're all gonna be really, really different from one another just because of the colors. So structurally the yarns will be the same, but the color management will be very different. So that'll be really neat. Yeah, it's not flyaway. So Eve says hair conditioner on your hands is good for flyaway fibers. It's not flyaway when you're spinning. It's just when you're stripping it down. And I didn't want to put too much on the fiber itself. I wanted to leave it sort of as untouched as much as possible for spinning, because it's not a particularly flyaway fiber. It's just as you're stripping it. You'll find this when you do yours. It just kind of comes apart a little bit. Would the difference in staple length between the longest and shortest fibers in this fiber top make it more prone to misalign when stripped thinner? Maybe. I mean, all worsted preps have that varying staple length in them. So, which of course, you know, unless you actually check the staple length, we're usually not aware of. So in this one, I suspect it's just the nature of the fiber. It just tends to be, I don't know what the right word is. Flyaway isn't really the right word. When you're stripping it, like I'll show you. I'll take one of these, for example, and I'll show you. I'll move this stuff out of the way and I can show you guys what I mean. So when you start to go and strip it, so I've got one of the natural divides here. Okay, let's keep going, because I had riveting things that we were talking about and then we got interrupted. Oh, technology. So mash them. See how as you take it apart, even if you try to keep it as clean as possible as you pull it apart, you see how it just naturally wants to. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes anyways, because the show, like always, is getting quite long. But that's what I was talking about. So as you continue to strip down the fiber, it just gets a bit messy. And it's not anything to do with the dyeing or anything like that. This happened when I've spun Mash'em in the past. It was the same experience. It's just the fiber. And it just kind of goes a bit fuzzy and just falls apart a little bit. But when you go to spin it, it realigns and it drafts really beautifully and it drafts totally parallel. So when I have been stripping it, that's one of the reasons why I haven't been stripping it quite so much and why I've left it a little bit more like chunks like this. So because they come off really, really nicely and it doesn't mess up the fiber too much. But you see, if you don't really hold on to it and really pull it apart really nicely and really gently, it just falls right apart. So just something to keep in mind. And sorry for that interruption, because that completely interrupted our conversation and our train of thought. The Ramy BFL blend I spun was similar with stripping. Yeah, so some of these different fibers they just strip differently, right? Some of them don't like being stripped a ton, and some of them you can strip them and strip them and strip them and it makes no difference. I personally find, I would love to hear others feedback as well, the finer the fiber, the better that it strips. The thicker, coarser, toothier it becomes. Like I find Romney strips like that, it tends to drift apart a little bit more. You would think it would be the opposite, but I think they're just, it's just all of the differences in the fiber length. It just likes to hold onto itself. Yes, isn't that so true? I think it's because they are slightly toothier. And yeah, Katrina says it probably, that she thinks it has something to do with the huge variances in the fiber length. I think you're probably right, because I've experienced it with Romney as well. So just be really careful when you're stripping it, because for me, I wanted to try to keep the color repeats as intact as possible. And because some of those colors are so beautiful, as I was spinning, you know, seeing them realign and seeing them come together and seeing that sheen is really beautiful. Yeah, so this top, I'm not sure how this top was made. Rebecca has a great question, has a great thought. She says, I think you once said that these tops are made from many pencil rovings, and when you pull them apart, you can see that. Is that not true with this one? So I think, yeah, and the crimp must interlock and hold it together more. So with this one, as soon as you open it up, mine's all twisted because I keep twisting it for to store it. So when you open this one up, and actually it'd be really interesting to know if Katrina would be able to find out, because she might not be able to, where the mill is that this comes from, if it's created this way. But if you look at, if you really try to open this up, I'll try and do this under the camera, but I might not be able to. You see how when you open it up, that you can lay it flat, because it comes off on big drums, like big things of comb top. They're all laying next to each other like big bats, except that they're combed so that the fibers are all aligned and nicely. But you see how there's these natural lines in there, and those are natural places to be able to pull the fiber apart. But this fiber, and Romney, I find Romney is like this as well. They don't like to come apart. They want, you know, they're a little bit toothier. They've got the scales. They're not super wash. They don't, the fibers don't slide past one another, and they just like to stay, they want to be a family. They don't want to be taken apart. So regardless, it's just gorgeous fiber to work with. I'm really enjoying spinning with it. Okay, let's move on, because it's getting really, it's getting long. The show is getting long, and I have to go get Nora. Okay, let's talk about my Hauser yarn. So I plied up my Hauser yarn. This is yarn that is based on rope. It is a certain type of rope, Hauser rope. I finished it up. This is hedgehog fiber, superwash merino, and nylon. It is a 35-75. It's a weird blend. I think it might be 25-75%, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It turned out really different than I thought it would in terms of the color. So the original braid, like hedgehog fiber, she never braids her stuff. But we spun this colorway for some other work that Katrina and I were doing. And it's really interesting how the colors came out quite differently in comparison. Let me just pull up. I wanted to show you guys what the original braid looked like, or the original fiber, because it's pretty different. So this is the original fiber. If you guys can see that there. Hopefully there's not too much glare on my phone. My phone is starting to like bite the dust. I've had a lot of technical issues with it, and it's super slow. So this is what the fiber originally looked like. So you can see there's big chunks of black in there. There's some neon pink. There was actually neon yellow and neon green in there. There's a lot of blue. And I sort of thought that with all the white, it would end up being really pastel-y. And that's not really the case. There is some pastel in there, but there's a lot of depth and a lot of texture. And the finished yarn is very pinky purple. It's definitely got some black in there, but you can see like there's that yellow in there that's poking through. There's not as much blue showing as I thought that it would, but I think what happened was the blue and the pink combined to make purple, and that's why this is so purple. So I'm not sure to the untrained eye and to a newer spinner if you would necessarily put this fiber with this yarn. Like if you had one of those like matching charts, I'm not sure that you would put these two together if you were just seeing it for the first time. But I love it. And Hauser yarn is a 4-ply. So this is a 4-ply yarn. Let me open this up and I can show it to you. It was a pain in the butt to make. I'm not sure that I loved the process. I'm just being honest. I took the fiber. Hedgehog fiber generally is 125 grams of fiber. So I took my fiber, I divided it into 2 equal bundles. So it was roughly 66, 67 grams. 2 bundles of just over 65 grams. I spun 1 to 1 bobbin on my Ashford E Spinner 3, and I spun the other one to another bobbin. So I had these 2 bobbins of singles, and then I kind of went, shoot. Because I knew I was making a 4-ply, and I should have planned for a 4-ply, and I think I just got really caught up in the spinning. So I made a plying ball. I took a rock. I use rocks for my plying balls. Don't ask me why. I can't find any of my felted little balls that my friend Diana gave me. And I wound 2 plying balls that were roughly 67 grams each. I took into account that the rock weighed 4 grams. And then I made 2 2-ply yarns. But the trick with Hauser yarn is you spin your singles going Z direction or clockwise. So for you, that's opposite. I'm showing you the opposite. You're going to spin this way. I'm spinning this way because I'm talking to you. So you're going to spin Z direction clockwise, and then you take your 2-ply, so your 2 singles, and you're going to ply Z again. So you're not making a cabled yarn, you're making a Hauser yarn. So you're going to ply in the same direction that you spun your singles. So basically what you end up with is 2 singles laying next to each other that are super overplied. Enter the problem. Getting this adequately plied. So then I had 2 bobbins of 2-ply. It's not really 2-ply because the yarn is kind of sitting next to each other, but it's so overspun by this point that they're kind of unruly and they don't want to be friends with each other, the 2 strands, the 2 singles, because they're laying in the same direction, and then you push them in that same direction even more. So then they're like, well, I don't want to be friends with you. So they're all kind of like, it just doesn't look great on the bobbin. It looks really messy, and the yarns don't want to sit together. So then you go to take those 2 bobbins and ply them together going S-twist, so going anti-clockwise, which you would have done in a cabled yarn if you were doing a cabled yarn the traditional way. But in this case, we went a-traditional and we went single Z, ply 2-ply Z. Now we're plying again S. Oh, sweet mother of pearl. This was probably the hardest yarn I've ever plied in my entire life. No matter what I did, it would not ply adequately, like at all. So I was sitting there adding ply twist and more ply twist and more ply twist. So this is the final step. I'm running the wheels at S twist now, right? To get these 4 strands to ply together. And I'm adding more, and I'm adding more, and I'm adding more, and I'm still getting a twist angle when I pull it off the wheel of like 10, 15, 20 degrees. And meanwhile, I need a ply twist of like 45 to 55 degrees to make a yarn that's not only balanced, because there's so much Z twist in it, but that will withstand the wear and tear of knitting socks, which is what makes this yarn so strong. But it's probably the hardest yarn I have ever plied in my entire life. So I got to the end of the bobbin. This is about 450 yards of 4-ply sock yarn out of 125 grams of fiber. And I got to the end of the bobbin, plying, I mean. So it's all plied, it's on the bobbin, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it. And I just thought, okay, I'll wind it onto my Swift, or onto my skein winder, sorry. I'll see what my yardage is. I'll see where I'm at. I'll, just do all the things, make a skein, and see if I've added enough ply twist. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, there's not enough ply twist. There's still not enough ply twist. Meanwhile, I've put so much treadling into this yarn on my highest ratio, which is like 28:1 on my Magicraft Suzy Pro. And I put it on my Lazy Kate, the bobbin. I took it off the wheel, put it on my Lazy Kate, put it behind me, and I put it through the wheel again. And that gave me this yarn. And now it's adequately plied. I'm not sure I'm ever going to make this yarn again. So it was insane. It just like would not ply. So that's my story about my Hauser yarn. I'm not sure I ever want to knit with it. I'm just like, it took so much effort to make. And it was frustrating. But I also feel like one of the things that Sarah Anderson talks about in some of her interweave videos, because she made there's quite a few videos that you can get through interweave, through the Interweave Knits website that Sarah recorded after this book came out. They kind of go with this book, and by this book I mean this one, the Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs. And she goes through some of the yarns in here that were really popular, and she talks about some other techniques, and she sort of goes over there's some really good videos. There's a whole bunch of them. Anyways, she talks about in one of those videos, and I don't know which one it was in, because she actually mentions this quite a few times, about how amazing twist is. And this yarn, I always feel this way when I make my textured yarns, and I really felt a renewed sense of appreciation for her comments around how truly amazing twist is, and how it's just such an amazing thing. Like, you've got this yarn that's so overspun in the Z twist direction. Of course, just when you start to reason it out and start to sort of take a moment and really try to understand, where is that twist? Where did it go? It's in the singles and it's in the plied yarn, but it's all going one way. It's all going Z twist. Of course, in hindsight, you're going to need an incredible amount of twist to counteract that going Z, to balance that yarn and to make an adequately twisted yarn. Otherwise, it's just going to be underplied. And that was really incredible. You know, to see that in person over 450 yards and having to work through that and figure that out, to me, is really where the learning happened, was just how incredible twist is. And some of these yarns take a lot to get them balanced. And this is one of them. So the finished yarn looks like this. I'll see if I can get a little bit of a close-up for you guys. It might be too close. And you can really see what this yarn looks like. It's a very interesting yarn because it looks like a traditional 4-ply. To the untrained eye, it looks like a traditional 4-ply, but the singles aren't really nicely laying there. They're almost sort of in conflict with each other, if that makes sense. So they're almost kind of like a little bit active still in their place in the yarn, and they're not laying perfectly. It's not like a cabled yarn, but they're not laying together really beautifully and really evenly like they were in my traditional 4-ply that I finished about a month ago. Like in this yarn, it's really smooth. The 4 plies lay together really beautifully, whereas in this yarn, they're almost sort of still quite active, which is really interesting. So I'm really, as much as I say I'm never going to look at this yarn again, I'm totally joking. I'm really excited to start knitting the socks with this yarn and to see what the socks look like knit up. So that's all I'm going to say about this yarn for now, because we are going to delve into more sock stuff again in the spring. And I need a chance to just process this yarn in my own mind and some of the principles of what made that twist so difficult to manage in the plying, and try and get it out more eloquently in the How I Spin content over the next few months. So I will make this yarn again, mostly just to compare it to this one, because it is really cool yarn. Katrina and I had a play date for the kids on Monday, and I forgot to bring it because I wanted to show it to her, and I totally forgot, because I am quite excited about this yarn, even though it was very frustrating to make. sounds like I will do that one on the e-spinner. Not sure my knees could take it. That's probably a good idea, Suzanne. And it's funny because after I applied this, like after I got the 2-ply both ready on the 2 bobbins to apply into to make the 4-ply, I actually kind of had sort of regretted not seeing the whole thing through on my e-spinner, because I had switched from using my e-spinner for the singles to applying it on my Magic-Craft. So I was kind of bummed that I didn't do the whole thing on my e-spinner, but my Noel yarn was already on it, my Christmas spin that I was talking about last show in episode 2000, in episode 107. And so I decided to just do this on my Magic-Craft. So I will say it is a little bit crunchy. It's superwash merino nylon. It is a little bit crunchy, but it's still quite soft, which is pretty amazing. So let's move on to the last thing, because I really do have to watch the clock. It's not stretchy. Eve was wondering if it was stretchy. Yeah, socks of steel. How true is that? It's not. It's got a little bit of stretch. It's not bad. A little bit, probably half an inch. Yeah, probably about half an inch of stretch. And just for comparison's sake, my 4-ply, my traditional 4-ply, I mean, was probably about the same. If you guys can see that there. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah. Both equally fine. They're the same gauge. So I'll knit this up. I'll knit these socks up on 2mm needles. And we'll see in the knitted fabric if the yarn relaxes at all and what the fabric feels like. So I am excited to knit with this yarn. I'm really curious what it's going to do and how it's going to act. I have a lot of it too, so I'm hoping that I can do a little bit of swatching afterward. So okay, let me get this skeined up, and then so the idea, Megan was just asking if this is stronger than a regular cabled yarn because of all of the ply twist. It is supposed to be stronger than cabled yarn. I think the idea is because it's so massively twisted in the one direction, and then you have to put in the opposing ply, like the opposing ply twist to balance it. I don't know if Sarah says in her book. She does say how difficult they are to ply, though. I meant to mention that. Sorry for not mentioning that before. She does say the extra twist in the applied yarns will bunch up below your hand as you slide it down. Very much totally what happened. Leaving you with a very inconsistently plied yarn, which is exactly what I experienced. And the best way that she's found to ply these stinkers, her words, not mine, is with a tensioned Lazy Kate. And I definitely found that having the tension on my Kate helped a lot. I tend to ply off of tensioned Lazy Kates anyways, but I did find in this case that it was helpful. So, and then she's got some variations in here of like different variations for Hauser yarns and different things that you can do with your Hauser yarns. So, I don't think she has. If somebody finds it, can you send me a note if there are Hauser socks in the book? I don't think there are. I know there's chain ply versus traditional, and there's opposing 3-ply versus traditional, but I don't think she has any in here that are the Hauser yarn versus traditional, but I might be wrong. So if you guys do know if that exists in here, can you just email me, message me the page? I would really appreciate that. Okay, last thing. I cast on a new project. Thank you for your compliments on my bangs. I started the Radiate pullover by Joji Locatelli. Sorry for the banging. I'm using some of my stash yarn. So this is stash hand spun, and I'm using some DK West Yorkshire Spinners Eyre Valley DK, And this is West Coast Color and Carding. Although I think that Lynn is only going by West Coast Color now. Katrina, maybe you know if it's just West Coast Color now. And this has been sitting in my stash for eons, and I finished it quite a long time ago, and I've been really wanting to knit with it. And so I had it sitting on our mantle because I figured if I saw it every day, a la K Facet, he's a big proponent of if you want to work with something and you want to find some inspiration for something, leave it out where you see it every day, and it'll kind of come to you in time. So this was already wound into a ball. And it's just these really neutral greens, and there's some brown in there, some blues. It's just, overall, it's forest green. And this pullover starts up here at the top of the yoke with a cast on. And you knit a few rows in the contrast color, which is the green. And then you add the main color, which for me is the cream. And you work your way down, and at first I thought it was a brioche that she had done, but it's actually not. It's just a mock rib. And as you transition down through the yoke, you knit through the contrast color, and hers is knit in a neon pink. And then you eventually break the main color. Sorry, the contrast color. You break the contrast color and you knit the rest of the body in the main color, the sleeves in the main color, and you end up with this gorgeous yoke. So that is my yoke. I think I have 3 more rows of the contrast color to do. So 6 more rows in total, and I'll be finished the yoke, the color work in the yoke. And that's it at the top there. I think I'm showing you the back. I didn't mean to. This ugly place where you have to cast on. So here's the front. This is much nicer. And you work short rows at the top back here at the beginning to lift up the back. And then before you separate for the sleeves, you do some more short rows in the main color down here to lift up the back even more. So it creates a really nice shape. Now, I took this off. Oh, and it was so funny because I was knitting at my parents' house. And James's toque was on timeout because it had come out too big, which I mentioned at the beginning. And I was sitting there knitting away on it. And my dad's like, "Oh, what are you making? Are you making a toque for yourself?" Because I was like, I was in here somewhere. So it still looked small enough that it could be a toque. And I was like, "No, I'm knitting a sweater." He's like, "For Nora?" And I was like, "No, for me. The stitches are just really bunched up on the needles. Like, it just looks really small." And he's like, "Oh, well, that looks really small." I'm like, no, the stitches it's on a 16-inch cable. Like, it's just small. He's like, "Oh, well, did you swatch?" It's like, oh my gosh. Spoiler alert, no, I didn't. But it's a top-down sweater, so I don't worry about it. And Hohi's patterns, I tend to get the right gauge. And we just had a whole conversation about how you're supposed to gauge swatch and do all your swatches and all of that. So just ignore everything that I said about not swatching just now, because I totally swatched. So anyways, what I did do, though, is I took... These are my Likey interchangeable needles. So I put these on a really long cable. I put it on a cable extender, which come with the Chow Goos, it comes with the Addies, and it comes with the Likey needles. You can extend the cable and make it longer. And I think the Knit Picks needles have the cable extenders as well. So anyways, I put a second cable on, and then I put it on my dress form, which is actually over there right now. And it fits perfectly. So I've just continued on and continued to knit away on a sweater that everybody says is too small for me, but it's actually not. So that is what I'm working on. And actually, once I separate for the sleeves, which hopefully will be this weekend, I'll put it on my dress form and I'll post some photos in the Slack channel for people to see. Because when I did put it on my dress form, unfortunately it was really dark. And I could have turned on my lights, but I find it really blows out any photos that I take when the lights are on. Like, I find natural light, it gives me better photos to take when I've got stuff on my dress form. So when I put it on my dress form after I separate for the sleeves, I'll post some photos on the Slack channel for you guys to be able to see what it looks like. Because I have to say, I was really pleased with it. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work on this in between James's toque being on timeout. So yeah. All right, let me just catch up with chat, and then yeah, so she's going by just West Coast Color now. Thank you, Katrina. I think her website is westcoastcolor.com or .org, and her colors are just amazing. I've talked about Lynn before. She's part of our guild. I've known her for a really long time. She's a retired trauma nurse, just like me, so we have a lot in common, and it's just really wonderful to be able to support her. She's local. She's from the Vancouver area, but her and her husband have a sheep farm up just outside of Peachland, and I think they're in Tappan, British Columbia. So just really wonderful people, her and her husband Chris. Let me just really quickly make sure I've caught up with everything, and then I will say goodbye because I do need to be cognizant of time so that I can get Nora. 51 Yarn Spin Along starts January 1st. I hope that you will be joining us. There will be a thread in Ravelry. I think there is already a thread in Ravelry for people to post their yarns as they work on them and to post anything that they're learning. Try to post only finished yarn photos or finished projects with your yarns rather than in progress photos. We have an in progress thread on the Ravelry group, so just to try to keep the thread a little bit clean so that people can see the finished yarns as you finish them off. You don't have to be a patron of the show to participate in the 51 Yarns Spin Along. If you are a patron, however, every month you will get the teaching content that goes with the 51 Yarn Spin Along and my interpretation of what I did with the yarn that month, and it also tells you which yarns we're working on. So for January, we're going to be working on fine and medium wools. And so that'll be coming to you guys on January 1st if you're a patron of the show. But like I said, you don't have to be a patron to participate. We have, so those of you who've been around for a while, you'll remember that I used to spin the monthly club for Sweet Georgia, and then Felicia decided about a year and a bit ago that she wasn't going to continue doing club because they wanted to work on other things and focus on other stuff. They School of Sweet Georgia, just all of the changes over there. So I haven't been spinning club for the last month. Anyways, I'm going to start doing it for Katrina. So her fiber club is, I think she has basic club and then also luxury club, and I'll be spinning whatever she wants me to spin every month. So that'll start in January, and I'll have that to share with you guys, which I'm really excited about because I basically covet the colors and the fiber every month, and it'll be really fun to actually be able to spin them every month. So I hope you look forward to those spoilers with me. I'm hoping that I'll be able to share what I did with the club in the second show every month. And Breed and Color Study vlogs and the How I Spin content will be starting in January. So as of January, that will be the Breed and Color Studies. I'll be talking about how I spun the yarns, what I did in the vlog and on the PDF download on How I Spin, Thoughtful Spinner, and the co-executive producer tier. So if you want to see any more about what I'm doing with the Breed and Color Studies, hop on over to Patreon and subscribe to one of those tiers. And I just wanted to say thank you so much before we take our winter break until the new year for those who do continue to support the show. I know for some it sometimes sort of feels like, well, why would I support the show? I watch the podcast, that's enough. Or maybe I'm in the Ravelry group and that's enough. But it really does help me to keep the lights on over here. There's a lot of hosting costs that are sort of hidden behind the scenes for a lot of podcasters. There's equipment costs. And I really love teaching about yarn and about hand spinning and about what goes into making my yarns. I love passing on that knowledge to others and sharing knowledge. And the time that I spend on all of this stuff means that I'm not at the hospital working in my career job, which I don't mind about at all. I would way rather be here, but it does mean that the Patreon allows me to be here and to do this. So I just wanted to really say thank you so much to those who continue to support the show and offer me this opportunity to do that. So thank you so, so, so much. And I wish you a very happy holidays, and I hope you get a bit of a rest over this winter break, whatever that looks like for you in your part of the world. And Happy New Year. And I will see you in early January with a new show. For the December giveaway in the Ravelry thread, it's open to everybody. I think we'll do a calendar giveaway just to start off the new year. And I had a really good prompt, and I was thinking about it on the way home from dropping off Nora at school, and I forget what it was. Shoot. Oh, it was about swatching. Do you swatch when you're knitting with your hand spun? It goes back to the spinning growth that we had today. Do you swatch your hand spun? And if so, do you notice a difference in your swatched hand spun versus commercial yarns? I'm just curious. So that'll be our prompt for December, and I will give that away in January. We'll do like this month. We'll give away 2 calendars, one for the patrons and one for the December episode thread on Ravelry. So I hope you guys have a wonderful break, and happy spinning, happy knitting, and I will see you all in January. Thank you for those who spent some time today in the live stream. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We lost internet. And I just appreciate those who stuck around and waited for that all to resolve. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.